the Cure Parkinson's Trust in England, who's been just a superhero for PD. He's had PD since he was 17. He passed away last week, and it's a huge loss to the PD community, and I wanted to play a video of him singing a song about Parkinson's from the Third World Congress in Montreal in 2013.
That's right. With this Parkinson's disease, they're riding like a snake, they quite suddenly you freeze. And no that's gonna change for sure. When we find that cure. Yes, that's right. Can't control my action. I'm a one-man walking around distraction. You got me like a puppet on the string. But I tell you now, we can beat this thing. I've got them puffing, holding, continuously holding. I'm in the shape. Like a rattlesnake, I'm shaking out stirred. Got a license to spill. My arms like break, twice the rate of a hummingbird. That's right. And there's no denying. Sometimes I feel so bad, I just feel like crying. But then again, I'm feeling in my soul that one day, very soon, I'll regain control. I got the puppet holding, demon holding. It's like the pain. I'm just shaking as the king. Quickness, yeah, it's all in my brain. Sometimes I find myself flat on my face. I just fulfill, wait until back on the case. That's right, Lord, I can't deny it. We monkeys need help. More humans deny it. Don't give shaking we've endured. Now I feel it's time. I think it's really time for you.
So I just wanted to take that minute to show you guys all the brilliance that was Tom, and he an amazing guy and a force for Parkinson's research. And he raised millions of dollars to help with research, and he had lived with it for 20-something years before he passed away. So, where do we go? Okay, all right. My talk, Parkinson's, more than a movement disorder. And I'm honored to be here with you at the second annual Never Give Up Meet and Greet. It's an honor to be speaking to my family here. And it's, okay. The inspiration for this talk came from a family member of a family member who has PD, an older man who said to me he was having something called Parkinson's psychosis, which I will talk a little bit about later. But he said to me, I can't believe that this is caused by Parkinson's. How many of you guys have had some weird symptom that had been attributed to Parkinson's, and you're thinking, this is Parkinson's? I mean, we're told that Parkinson's is just this tremor and this movement disorder, but there's so much more to it that people find themselves shocked when things happen that are out of what they're expecting. And I think that's something that really needs to change. And so, start with this. What's wrong with this picture? I pulled this off of Wikipedia. When you Wikipedia Parkinson's disease, this is the picture you see.
They're too old.
These are old guys who look
Crouching.
like they're shaking, who have a hunch, and that's the picture that people envision when they think of Parkinson's disease. They don't think of somebody who looks like me or any of you. And well, yeah, I did have a hunch. It's called truncal hypotonia, so you can't stand up straight, and some of us do have tremors. But there's so much more to it that this being propagated is what is causing people a lot of pain, because when they go to their doctors, and some doctors even think that this is the picture of Parkinson's disease, that there's so many other things going on that aren't getting treated. And so what I really want to talk about to you today is ways that we can sort of remediate that and be informed patients. So, Parkinson's, a degenerative neurological disorder, causes systemic dysfunction, not just tremor and movement issues. I really do believe that Parkinson's should be reclassified from movement disorder to systemic neurological disorder, because I think even the term movement disorder, well, movement is a significant part of the problem, and that's why I had DBS, because my movement was awful. There's more, and so I want to talk about what else there's going on. So I mentioned the Parkinson's psychosis that this friend was talking about, and Parkinson's psychosis happens to 40% of the PD population. I personally have not experienced it, so I can't speak too much about it on a personal level, but if it's happening to 40% of people with Parkinson's, how come we never hear about it? What PD psychosis is, from my understanding, is there are these delusions that is not real, but seems so physically real that it's kind of terrifying. Like he described, like feeling like he's covered in spider webs and being able to pick it up and put it off, or have bugs crawling on you that you can see that are not there, but it feels so real to you. And now there are medications. There is a medication for it, and that medication wasn't developed until 2016, 2017 is when that medication was developed. When this happened to people before, they're put on traditional antipsychotics, which can actually make Parkinson's worse by by antagonizing dopamine. And so this has been a huge problem for our community for so very long. And I want to talk about it because it's not being talked about. And by sharing this knowledge with you, I hope that it helps some of you going forward. My big push, as all of you guys know, as somebody who lives with gastroparesis and digestive tract paralysis caused by Parkinson's, is the vagus nerve. So the current theory of Parkinson's is that the misfolded proteins that screw up your substantia nigra and your basal ganglia, which is where dopamine is made, those misfolded proteins that are causing all the problems, stopping your dopamine, travel up the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is, if you see all those yellow branches, it's everywhere. So if you're having problems with, does anyone here have neurogenic orthostatic hypotension? Anyone been given that diagnosis? Anyone not know what that is? Okay, there's too many people in the Parkinson's community who have no idea what it is, and too many people with it. 1 in 5 people with Parkinson's has neurogenic orthostatic hypotension. And it's where you stand up, and when a normal person stands up, their blood pressure gets automatically regulated. You stand up and your blood pressure increases to accommodate you standing up. With people with PD, sometimes you can lose that reflex. So when you stand up, your blood pressure stays low. So, see, I had that, yeah. And you didn't even know what it's called, and now you do. NOH, neurogenic orthostatic hypotension. And sometimes your heart rate can shoot up because it's trying to compensate to pump blood through your body. And guess what? A lot of times you get dizzy and pass out. And there are some treatments for that are out, and there's a campaign going on, NOH awareness, that's trying to bring attention to this, but that's caused by the same issue, by damage to the vagus nerve, because it's misfolded proteins go from your gut to your brain through the vagus nerve, kind of thrashing it on their way up. And so that's what's really, what really does bother me about the health system is that half of you have it, half of you didn't know you had it. And so, you can see that heart and lungs and goes to the whole digestive tract, which is how, as some of you guys know, Meg Bernard and I both eat through a central line because our digestive tracts are so slow. Almost everyone with Parkinson's has some degree of constipation. That's the cause of it too. Not everybody will end up as serious to a point where you need tubes and lines, but everybody has some level. And the more we've been talking about this, the more we've been having people with Parkinson's who are having some of these issues going and getting the emptying scans and finding out that they also have gastroparesis. And I told my neurologist for years that I was losing my appetite, that I was eating food and feeling like I had eaten Thanksgiving. And, oh, it's just med side effects. It's probably nothing. Yeah, no, it's not. And finally, when I had lost so much weight, I went to the GI doc. And luckily, my GI doc knew that Parkinson's was one of the biggest causes of gastroparesis and was able to diagnose it within 5 minutes. And same with orthostatic hypertension. I went to my general doctor who just tested my blood pressure sitting and standing, and we saw a dramatic difference. And he knew what it was. And so what's happening is that these neurologists are thinking about your brain and they're thinking about dopamine, but they're not thinking about the systemic issues that can affect you. Okay, so I've listed a couple of these things you might recognize as some of the other symptoms that are not movement symptoms of Parkinson's. Anyone have anything on this list? Anyone have anything that's not on this list that is also not?
Might be that too.
You know, there's so many of these things that we go on. I mean, for me, sensory processing disorders is a big issue, where sometimes outside stimuli, my body and nervous system don't know how to react to it. Sometimes wearing leggings that are too tight will just send pain signals on my legs. And sometimes, you know, the sleep disorders are a huge problem in the PD community. And there's OCD, you know, neurogenic bladder issues, and depression. There's so much more than just dopamine being missing. And that's the problem, is they think they give you levodopa and it replaces dopamine, and that should be a theoretical fix. But just the fact that it's not a full fix is telling me there's something more going on, and it's telling us all there's something more going on. And really, all of these other issues.
What is that first one?
That's NOH, neurogenic orthostatic hypertension.
The drop in blood pressure.
The drop in blood pressure. So,
There you go.
now you know. But all of these things, I think, are very undertreated in our population. And that's something I want to talk about. The other thing is, how do you describe these things to your doctors? Internal tremors. I had been having these for years, and even before my diagnosis, and I sort of described it as tingling without the numbness, which then led my doctors to test my nerves. They thought I had neuropathy. I did not have large fiber neuropathy. But how do you describe that feeling? The problem is that you're speaking a language where you're just trying your best to put together these weird sensations that you don't really have terms for. And doctors have their very strict, rigid terms. They think, okay, this sensation means this thing is wrong. And if you don't have a terminology to talk to the doctors, there's a big miscommunication going. And so really what is great about these patient communities is helping each other describe things. Like, oh, you're feeling this, I kind of have this similar feeling. I think a lot of the terminology that I've gained over the years connecting to the patient community that has helped me talk to my doctors has come from talking about my symptoms with other people who are experiencing the same symptoms. And so that's a huge thing that I think we need to tell the system they need to fix too, because it's on their end too. Doctors need to also reach out to us with better ways to try to get us to explain to them in a way that we both understand what each other are saying.
Yes.
So the system is broken, what can you do? You can be the bridge with knowledge and being an advocate for yourself. And to educate not only your doctors about your own symptoms, but also to educate the different specialists you're gonna see about PD and about the connections between PD and these other things. Like, I was lucky enough to have a GI who understood that PD caused the gastroparesis, but not everybody who's looking at the gut is gonna think about the way the nervous system affects the gut. Not everyone looking at the nervous system is gonna think about the way it affects the gut, because they're thinking about the brain, they're not thinking about the rest of your body. There's not this connection between your whole body, which when you have a systemic disorder like Parkinson's, it's gonna affect pretty much everything.
So how do you get past the ego of the specialist? You're more informed than he is.
You
How do you get
tiptoe.
past the ego? I always say that I like to sort of talk them into the diagnosis that I know I have.
Yes.
Guide them, in other words.
Yeah, you know, these sort of leading
So what you're
phrases.
saying is, and then make it.
Yeah.
You
right.
guide them into thinking they came up with it.
Exactly. If they think that they came up with it, you're golden.
Yep.
So traditionally, when you have a team of doctors for PD, you have your MDS neuro, your movement disorder specialist, who might send you to PT and OT, to speech language pathology. If you have DBS, you have a neurosurgeon involved, and your general practitioner if you're lucky. I have an awesome general practitioner, though sometimes I think I scare him. I know I scare him of all of this. But really, a lot of times with PD, you end up needing collaborations. You need GI. Pain management is a huge one because a lot of times neurologists have no idea or the desire to manage pain caused by neurological diseases, which really kind of bothered me. I'm like, wait, so my pain is caused by Parkinson's and you're not going to treat it? But in the end, I was really thankful that I went to a pain specialist because then you have somebody who's just focusing on that.
Are the doctors that say Parkinson's doesn't cause pain?
Yes, there's
That's
doctors that
right.
say Parkinson's doesn't cause pain unless you're talking about the physical pain, the from rotations,
That's-
from dystonia.
The doctor that I see, he said that because the definition of Parkinson's, especially through health insurance companies, does not include pain, then he's not allowed to treat for the pain by
Another
the
problem, yeah.
regulations that's put in place through the health insurance companies and or the definition of Parkinson's. So that's where he would love to treat our pain.
Yeah,
And he's just like, my hands are tied, I can treat it, but when I run it through your insurance, they're gonna go, no, you need to go to.
yeah,
Yep.
that totally doesn't even surprise me.
No, it's so true.
Yeah, they don't understand that. I mean, if you think about PD in the sense of, the way I sort of describe PD is you have the stimulus and your brain doesn't have the right molecules, the right neurotransmitters to respond appropriately. So it sends out all these bad miss signals. Those miss signals go everywhere. If you think about how they describe fibromyalgia, which, to be honest, I really do believe that fibromyalgia is just a collection of other diseases. And a lot of people, I think, are overdiagnosed with fibromyalgia when in reality they have something else going on that should be treated. But the whole hypothesis behind it is that you have these overfiring nerves that are causing pain. How is the same not true in Parkinson's when that's the definition of PD?
One thing I also want to point out with fibromyalgia, they did a study, and I want to say something like 86% of the people they tested had small fiber neuropathy,
Yep.
which is also common in Parkinson's and is a source of pain.
Yep.
So if you're having trouble with the PD diagnosis and pain, ask them to do a skin biopsy to check for small fiber neuropathy because that can be a source of pain. It can also lead to a lot of the autonomic issues.
Very
you're talking
true. They
about.
all go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is that when they test the nerve conduction studies only test the very large fibers. So if you're having issues with very small fibers they can't see on those electric shock studies, they're not going to diagnose it. So a lot of times you'll have that electric pain, that cold and hot sensation pain, and a lot of that is I think I have read I think about 80% of people with PD are also thought to have small fiber neuropathy. That's a great point. So ideally, all of these people, so you have urology for neurogenic bladder, you have social workers, which would be a great addition to a team, I think, and orthopedic doctors too, because Parkinson's, especially when you have dystonia with your Parkinson's, is pulling your bones, you're pulling your body in all these different directions. You could end up with orthopedic problems that say, oh, it's not caused by the Parkinson's. It's like, well, yeah, it is, because for years my ankle's been twisting. And there's some simple things, like I had ankle foot orthosis for a couple years before I had DBS that kept my legs straight, and that kept me from destroying my joints. And even that took me 4 months to get approved, and I eventually just bought it on my own because I was tired of waiting. And tired of walking on an ankle that was twisted 80 degrees.
Yeah.
So, if all of these work together, that'd be awesome. In reality, they're not going to. And no matter how good we get the system, it's probably not going to happen. But as a patient who's educated, you can take these and find doctors who are not going to have that ego, which is difficult. Finding some certain specialties without egos is a little challenging, but they do exist. And if you can get them to listen and get them to understand how it interconnects with the body, then you're going to get much better care. Yeah.
And I love you include the social workers, but man, I tell you, when it came to, you know, with Caitlin, we were going through her whole testing process, and then we found out she had the dope responsive dystonia. I swear, what I felt like to me was because she wasn't on a death sentence, she was pushed aside, and that was so frustrating to me because I think social workers could be such an integral part of everything, you know, as you say.
Yeah.
But it's like if you're not dying, you're so on the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, and that happens, I think, with dystonias and Parkinson's a lot too.
Mhm.
Especially because Parkinson's is not always classified as
You just have the shakes.
yeah, and sometimes Parkinson's is not classified as a disorder that can take lives when it can't.
One of the things that disturbs me the most about Parkinson's is it's a reality for everybody that has it, that the symptoms are so varied. The intensity or lack thereof makes everybody unique in their journey with Parkinson's. And doctors inherently always try to put everything in a box.
Exactly.
And there is no box when it comes to
Parkinson's does not have a box.
It is like
Neither does
it's like a
dystonia. There's so many
porcupine.
kinds.
It's like a porcupine with all those quills. You don't know which one is, you know, gonna
Yeah.
get you right or not.
And the younger you are with PD,
Then the more it's disbelieved.
Yeah, and the more likely you are to have rigidity and bradykinesia and dystonia as opposed to tremors.
Right.
And tremors can sometimes be the dead giveaway for PD, and so a lot of times they look at all kinds of other directions before they head towards the PD direction. And so that's also an issue.
And if you're lucky enough to get a movement disorder doctor that takes you straight off as, we're starting from zero here, and we're gonna check this, and then we check this, and we check this. And it's a series of checks before
Yeah.
the
Diagnosis
realization
of
comes that,
exclusion.
in our opinion, with what you've shown and what you've told us and what we see, because your doctor has to believe you, and you have to be honest with them. Otherwise, you're not gonna get the kind of help that you need.
And it's a huge problem, and it's a huge problem to not be believed, and it's especially when people end up in the hospital, which as people with PD do sometimes. There have been hospitalizations that I've had for PD, and one of the issues is not getting meds on time, because they don't understand how vital it is. It says, when I say on the hour, I mean on the hour within 10 minutes tops. You know, it means it has to be, if you're half an hour late, it's gonna be a problem. It's gonna make my symptoms worse, and so, having that diagnosis and having it be believed is a huge problem.
How do you feel about, like, my original diagnosis was, due to my response to carbidopa. Some doctors think that that's crap,
Yeah.
and that's frustrating too.
That is frustrating. That's how I was diagnosed as well.
Yeah.
My first diagnosis was actually dope responsive dystonia, and it was that they started me on Cinemet, and in a couple weeks I got a lot better. I was doing really well, and for about 8 months I was like really hanging out in Cinemet, feeling great, and then after about 8 months or so, I needed a little bit more to keep that same function, which was okay. You know, I was 18 at this point. They're thinking maybe you just grew up a little bit. You know, your body's still changing. And then I needed more and more, and then I needed Azilect because I was fluctuating a lot. You know, it lasts about 2 hours and they would drop off, and everyone who has PD knows the fluctuations are worse than actually not having a low level. And so the problem with that was that, you know, then I got dyskinesia about 2 years after that, and that's when they said, okay, you don't have PD because you got dyskinesia. Dyskinesia you're supposed to get in 5 to 10 years, and I always say my PD is just an overachiever. it likes to prove it wrong. And so with my PD, it was then that was diagnosed, and then, you know, then 8 months later I had DBS, which is a whole other story. But yeah, that was my the Cinemet trial was also my diagnosis, and I mean, honestly, if you improve that much with Cinemet, clearly you're lacking dopamine. That's my theory. And there are some doctors who do believe that.
And will you tell me how you feel about DAT scans? Because I know that's
screw DAT scans.
Could you repeat your question out loud on the microphone?
Yeah, she asked about DAT scans. How many people here have had a negative DAT scan and have a pretty obvious Parkinson's diagnosis? Yeah, there's quite a few in the room. They're not reliable, and sometimes I think you have a DAT scan that is either says it's a false negative or it's comes out as questionable, then it gives people a license to question your diagnosis. When really, I think PD should be a diagnosis made on clinical symptoms, and a response to medication. I mean, if you find AP, which is not always levodopa, I know in Jerry's case you're doing it, was Aslock that was the right medication for you, but then it helped, and it's kind of like, okay, clearly something is being done to your dopaminergic system that is increasing the dopamine in your brain, which is letting you move in a way that you could not move before. And so Parkinson's, the whole point of my presentation is Parkinson's is really complicated. It's a lot more complicated than the human docs think. And getting them to think the way that we are thinking about our body and the way that we're experiencing our body. The other thing about it is they see us for an hour every so often. They do not see you at 3 a.m. when you're laying there in pain and you can't go to sleep. They're not seeing you there when you're laying there trying to fall asleep because you don't have enough melatonin in your brain to fall asleep. That's actually the insomnia thing, is that when you raise dopamine, when you lower dopamine, you raise melatonin. They balance each other out. So like for me, before my diagnosis, I was sleeping like 16 hours a day. I was tired all the time. Low dopamine, high melatonin. I always had the chemical that was making me sleep in my brain. Once you start Cinemet, that balance breaks because you're introducing Cinemet, levodopa at random times. So you might find yourself really tired in the middle of the day and you need to take a nap. And you might find yourself at midnight laying there. There's nothing in my brain making me sleepy. So, there's so many different things, and doctors also a lot of times won't explain that to you in a way. It's like they need to think about it as well as you need to think about it. So the more you learn from each other and the more that you can take to your doctors, the better your care is going to be. Never settle for bad care. Always try to find a doctor that's going to help, or at least a doctor that's going to let you test out your theories and run with it. Because when we have all these treatments in this day and age, there's really no need for anybody to be in pain and suffering that they don't need to be because there's a treatment. Obviously, there's not a cure, and all of us are going to have some sort of issues that are not resolved by any medication that's out there, but if there's something out there that can help you, you deserve and you are entitled to have access to that. And that is something that I really do believe and want to share with you all. And I kind of want to end this presentation on a little note. Another question somebody asked me a while back is, how do you stay positive about your life? Having had Parkinson's for 8 years and had all these physical changes in life, and I decided I had to change. I had to change the way I think and change the way I do things and adapt, because the thing about PD is PD takes from you. It takes away your ability to eat. So for me, it took away my ability to eat food at all. And at first, it took my ability to sit down in a restaurant and eat food like a normal person because my hand was not working. And I remember that day, and I remember going home from the restaurant and just crying about it because it was miserable. But you have to change the way, you get creative, change the way that you use your body. Working with a hand that's not operational, you find ways to get around it. There's something you're passionate about, you don't have to give it up, you just have to do it in a different way. And you might find things that you really like because you had to try something new to replace something that you can no longer do, or find something that you do in a different way and you create something beautiful out of it. So I just wanted to share that at the end of my presentation before I take any questions, as the way that I am still standing here in front of you and have pushed through all this is because I have adapted. And without adapting, I think I would just be sad, and I'd rather be standing up here talking to a group of lovely people who have become my family and my support than be sad at home. So that's how I'll end it. Does anybody have any questions before I go? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say with the NOH, the neurostatic hypertension.
NOH, yeah.
One important thing to note is that with in the cardiac community, which I also belong to, having a cardiac pacemaker, people that have also had heart attacks, that same phenomena exists even there. So, I might be lying down, and then if I get up really fast, I have that feeling of faintness. In fact, even sitting in the chair, I was in that car. We went to the grocery store. I got out of the car. I almost collapsed. I had to hold on to the car. Mm-hmm. It's that you get that same phenomenon. So it's just something to keep in mind. The other thing I was gonna mention with the DAT scan, my doctor, of course, we went through the whole thing with
Mhm.
seeing if, like you said, medications, if I respond to that, because originally I had a diagnosis of Parkinsonism, and
Yeah.
we weren't sure if it was Parkinson's disease. But the DAT scan actually wound up helping us, because it was able to show that there was a definite deficiency in dopamine, both sides of my brain.
Yeah.
But one thing that they had to note was a positive DAT scan can indicate not only Parkinson's but also essential tremors. And for me, my mom's side of the family is genetic. So
Mhm.
initially when I had my hand shaking, I just thought it was the essential tremors. And then later I learned that I was one of the few people that had both Parkinson's and essential tremors.
Yeah, that's not very common to get.
No, they're not.
Yeah, originally it was either one or the other. And then
Another anomaly.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and it's true to say about NOH. I do want to. I realized I forgot to add. You know, it's important to talk to your doctors about these things, especially with NOH, because there are actually little things you can do to make it a lot better, like drinking a gallon of water a day, and before you stand up, you know, just pumping your legs a little bit so blood starts flowing. And it's like these little changes. If you didn't know and you just spent your life standing up and passing out every time you stood up, life kind of stinks. last meetup, I stupidly thought, I was like, oh, let's soak in the sauna for a bit.
After we just had talked
Yeah,
about
after
how
we
we
were
were
just
gonna
talking
do
about this, and then I got up and I was just like, about 5 minutes in, I was like, I need to get out of here. The heat is like, I'm gonna pass out. And I like just went back up to the room and just like laid down on the ground.
The cardiologists actually say for us when we're lying down, instead of getting up really quickly, just
Yeah,
sit up in your
slowly.
bed or your chair,
Yeah.
take some deep breaths, maybe for 10 seconds, and then get up. And then
Yeah.
it's totally.
And it's about knowing that, right? It's about knowing that and having your doctor help you manage it, because there's no need for you to be miserable and for you to pass out and yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to say, through your positivity, we feed off your strength, and you're a true warrior, and we love you.
Oh, thank you. Honestly, like without you, like I say, my family and support system, I cannot say enough things about how much NG means to me. So thank you.
You know, I'm wondering if the push to help get more support from the medical community is to have them, instead of classifying this as Parkinson's disease, to look at it as more of like a spectrum.
Yeah.
'Cause we have two sons on the autism spectrum, and their difference in their symptoms is night
Yeah.
and day, because it is an umbrella. And maybe
Parkinson's
that's
disease
where we
is
need to
probably about
focus.
1,000 different diseases that all have the same
Yeah.
pathology.
I so agree with that, and, same thing, you know, I and my daughter have the genetic dystonia, Doper dystonia, the GCH1 gene, and it was here that I learned that we cannot have protein with the pill, after she'd been sent home from school 8 different times for falling, and the funny thing is that, like, I can't count how many people here told me, oh, don't take food 30 minutes before or after the pill. No, we have to take food with it, or her and I will both throw up for hours. So I don't know what's different, like with me and her, you know, but I'm like, that's just one of the very many anomalies, I guess I would call it.
Yeah, little tiny genetic. I mean, when you have a genetic disease, there's, you know, different areas in the locus that could be mutations in a certain place that alters it slightly, and you know.
But I mean, and like, there's such a difference between the words condition, disorder, disease. Disease has I'm an English background, disease has a very negative connotation. Syndrome, not quite so much. But yeah, the spectrum, like, we're talking about autism, and like, we all vary so much. I think that's a good push to try for and change the terminology.
Definitely, I think there's only a spectrum of Parkinson's disease, and yeah, there's a lot of different things with terminology about how people like to classify it. Personally, for me, I do say that I do have a disease, neurodegenerative disease, and I do have a disability, and I like using the word a disabled person as disabled instead of disabled person, which is my personal preference, because I really do think that there's nothing that having Parkinson's is a part of who I am. It's intrinsic, and you can't separate me from the Parkinson's, but there's also more to me there, you know? And having Parkinson's does affect everything I do, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I mean, I want to cure, don't get me wrong, like to not have this anymore, but but it's a part of it.
And if you break up the word disease, it's dis-ease. So it's like dis-ease of the body. It's something
Exactly.
off balance, you know. So if you break it up into 2 words.
Too. Okay. I guess thank you all so much.